In the burning heat of the desert, a veteran found something still fighting to live. A dying German shepherd pup, clutching a torn canvas bag with what little strength he had left. When the man brought it home, he discovered what lay inside. Hundreds of metal tags, the names of fallen service dogs, souls that once served on the battlefield. No one knows how the pup ended up there, or what he was truly protecting. But from that moment, a journey for justice began, and what followed would prove that some promises never end with the ones who made them. Before we begin, tell me where you are watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. I truly wonder how far this story will travel, and if you believe no soldier, human or animal, should be left behind. Hit that subscribe button because this story might just be the miracle you need today. The desert did not move. It shimmered, a sea of molten glass that swallowed every sound, every color, until even the sky seemed to vanish into heat. The wind dragged its heavy breath across Red Canyon, carrying dust like whispers from forgotten wars. The air burned dry enough to peel the soul off bone. Nothing survived long out here, not even silence. Under a fractured boulder, a German shepherd puppy lay curled into himself. Ribs sharp, fur crusted with dust and blood. His coat had once been black and tan, but now it carried the color of the earth that would soon claim him. He couldn't have been more than 6 months old. One ear stood half erect, the other bent where hunger had weakened him. His paws trembled with each breath, and between them, clenched like a soldier gripping his flag, was an olive-drab canvas bag. The sun arched higher, slicing shadows into fragments. Flies circled. The air tasted of rust and heat. Each time the wind passed, it pulled at the bag, but the pup's jaw tightened. His eyes, clouded yet fierce, followed the dust as if expecting someone to return. He was dying, yes, but he wasn't surrendering. Hours later, an old pickup appeared on the horizon, dragging a storm of red dirt behind it. The truck was dented, its paint eaten by sun, the tires whispering over gravel like distant gunfire. Behind the wheel sat Raymond Cole, 55, his skin the color of weathered pine, his arms streaked with scars that told stories no one asked to hear. His hair, once dark, had given up its fight against gray. Even now, long after the war had ended, Raymond still checked his mirrors as though danger rode behind him. He came to the canyon often. Out here, the silence was almost enough. Almost. He parked the truck near a ridge and stepped out. The heat hit him like a wall. His boots sank slightly into the sand as he looked toward the horizon, a line that never seemed to get closer, no matter how far he drove. Then he heard it. At first it was nothing, a ripple in the wind. Then again, a whimper, faint, broken, almost swallowed by the heat. Raymond turned sharply. His senses, dulled by years of solitude, awoke with a jolt. The sound came from below the ridge where the land dropped into a dry ravine. He moved carefully, one hand instinctively hovering near the knife sheathed at his belt. Not from fear, but habit. The closer he got, the clearer the sound became. Not a cry for help, but something more fragile. A plea that didn't belong to a man. When he reached the hollow, the sight stopped him cold. A small dog, no, a pup, half buried in dust, its tongue cracked, its chest moving shallowly. Beside its muzzle, the canvas bag. He crouched slowly, his knees creaking, the desert swallowing every movement. "Easy now," he murmured, though his voice barely reached his own ears. The pup's eyes snapped open. They were the color of burnt amber, wild and defiant. It tried to rise, but collapsed again, Still, a low growl rumbled from its throat, the sound of a creature too proud to beg. Raymond had heard that tone before, in a tent filled with smoke, in a voice that told him to go while a bomb counted down. It was the sound of someone refusing to let go. The man froze. Memories returned not as pictures, but as weight. The metallic stench of blood, the shouts, the silence after. The canyon seemed to shrink around him. He took a slow breath and extended his hand. The pup's growl deepened. It was too weak to fight, but not too weak to mean it. Its paws tightened around the bag as if guarding treasure. The old soldier hesitated. A breeze shifted, carrying the faint rattle of metal from inside the bag, a whisper of something more than junk. The sound was clean, deliberate, and sacred. Raymond scanned the horizon. No tracks but his own. No tire marks. No footprints. The pup was utterly alone. He slid his water canteen free, poured a trickle into his cupped hand, and set it near the pup's snout. For a moment, nothing. Then a twitch. The tongue, dry and gray, touched the water. Another sip. Then the eyes lifted again, uncertain, waiting for betrayal. Raymond knelt lower, resting one hand on the sand. "At ease, little one," he said softly, the words escaping before he could stop them. "I've got your watch now." The dog's breathing slowed. Whether it understood or simply surrendered to exhaustion, he couldn't tell. The man waited. His shadow stretched long across the dying earth. He reached for the bag. It was heavier than it looked, soaked in sweat and dust. The fabric was military issue, frayed but unbroken, stamped faintly with a serial number he half recognized. He turned it over, the strap crusted with dried mud. Something inside clinked. Metal, solid, rhythmic, like the cadence of boots on concrete. Raymond paused. His thumb traced the edge of the zipper, hesitating as if opening it might disturb something sacred. The pup stirred faintly. One paw reached toward the bag, pressing against his wrist, not stopping him, not granting permission, simply reminding him that what lay inside mattered. For the first time in a long while, Raymond felt something shift within him, a small, forgotten ache beneath the ribs, the one that used to answer to words like duty and honor. He lifted the bag carefully, the sun glinting off the dust-covered metal hidden inside. The sound that followed was soft but unmistakable, a cascade of tags, names, ghosts. He looked down at the pup, whose eyes had already closed again, breath slowing but steady. Somewhere in that quiet, amid the heat and wind, he realized this wasn't just an animal clinging to instinct. It was a soldier, holding its post until someone relieved it. And now, someone has. The desert stretched endlessly around them, indifferent to their small moment. Yet for the first time that day, Raymond didn't feel the need to chase silence anymore. The silence had found him, and it had a story to tell. The storm never came that night, yet Raymond could hear one inside his own walls. The low hum of the old refrigerator, the creak of timber shifting with the mountain wind, and beneath it all, that fragile pulse of life wrapped in a wool blanket by the hearth. The puppy slept, though its breathing still carried the echo of the desert. Raymond set the torn olive bag on his work table, its weight landing like a memory too heavy to share with anyone. The cabin smelled of oil, cedar, and time. Tools lined the wall in military order, a habit he never unlearned. His jacket hung on the back of the chair, dusted with red canyon grit, and on the shelf above the table, an old frame. A photograph of two soldiers with a German shepherd between them. The dog's name had once been Max. Raymond didn't look at it long. Some ghosts were polite enough to wait in silence until you turned your back. He pulled the fabric open with careful hands. It gave way easily, as if it, too, had been waiting to let go. The first glint came like spilled light, a shower of silver and brass scattering across the table, catching the glow of the lamp. They rang out, one against another, a metallic chorus that didn't belong to this quiet place. Dozens of small rectangular pieces slid into the cracks of wood, each one stamped with letters worn by sand and years. He lifted one tag between his fingers. K9 Duke, EOD Unit 4210, the next. K9 Baron, 6th Handler Corps, another. K9 Rex, Unit 4206. They weren't just numbers. They were soldiers. Raymond exhaled slowly, the sound more like surrender than breath. The dog on the floor whimpered, a faint sound that broke the cabin's rhythm. Raymond looked down. The puppy stirred, restless, searching for something unseen. He hesitated, then lifted the torn bag from the table and laid it beside the small body. Almost instantly, the puppy went still. No whimper, no shiver, only the soft, steady rise and fall of its chest. Raymond knelt beside it, one hand hovering above the blanket. "You weren't guarding a bag, were you?" he murmured. "You were guarding them." He looked again at the dog tags, scattered like fallen metals. They gleamed faintly in the lamplight, some dented, some polished smooth from years of wear. Each carried not just a name, but the sound of a bark, a command, a heartbeat that once answered a soldier's call. The table felt alive with them, as though every clink was a breath from those who never made it home. He reached for his phone, the number already living in muscle memory. When the line clicked, a familiar voice filled the static. "Dr. Evelyn Hart," she answered, brisk as always. "Evelyn, it's Ray," he said quietly. "I've got something you might want to see." She arrived an hour later, headlights cutting through the pine shadows that cloaked the cabin road. Snowmelt hissed beneath her tires. Raymond met her at the door, tall, steady, a woman, in her mid-40s with weather in her eyes. Her coat was gray wool, lined with fur. Her stethoscope hung like a medal. Strands of chestnut hair framed a face that looked like it hadn't rested in a decade. "Raymond Cole," she said softly, studying him. "You sound like you did the night Max." He shook his head. "Not tonight." Inside, she paused. The lamplight flickered across the work table, turning brass into gold. Her breath caught the moment she saw it. The sea of tags spread out like relics. What is all this?" she whispered. Raymond didn't answer. Instead, he gestured toward the sleeping puppy by the fire. Its fur had dried, revealing streaks of sable beneath the dust. A faint scar curved over one paw, almost like a signature. Evelyn stepped closer. The faint metallic scent still lingered. Not blood, but steel aged by desert air. She reached for one tag, traced her thumb over the letters, and froze. "These are unit IDs," she said slowly. "Explosive Ordnance Division. Every tag here belonged to a working K9. Raymond nodded once. They were all together, buried in a canyon. He was lying over them. Her eyes lifted to the puppy, then back to him. "That bag wasn't cargo," she murmured. "It's a memorial." The word hung in the air, heavier than grief. Raymond turned away, staring into the fire. "I thought I'd stopped hearing them," he said. "The ones we lost. Guess they found a way to remind me." Evelyn's hand brushed over the table, the tags chiming softly under her touch. Who would have gathered all these? "Someone who knew," Raymond replied. "Someone who remembered." They stood in silence. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faint cry of an owl through the trees, the kind of sound that made the world feel both infinite and small. The puppy stirred again, as if responding to it, paw brushing the corner of the bag. Evelyn knelt down, checking its pulse, listening to the faint rhythm under her stethoscope. "Strong," she murmured. "You got to him just in time." Raymond didn't speak. He was looking at one tag that had rolled to the floor, landing face down near his boot. He bent down, picked it up, turned it over. The letters were different this time. Hand-stamped, crude, uneven. It wasn't like the others. The edges were jagged, the surface darker, as if forged from a different kind of metal. Iron, not brass. He wiped the dust away with his thumb. The name glimmered in the firelight. Shadow. The room went utterly still. Even the puppy seemed to sense the change. Its ears flicked, eyes opening just enough to see the tag in Raymond's hand. Evelyn looked up, voice trembling slightly. "Ray." That name. He didn't let her finish. The tag pressed cold against his palm, the name burning hotter than the desert ever could. He didn't know yet what it meant. But he knew this. Every name in that bag had already found its peace, except one. And somewhere, somehow, a shadow was still waiting. The night stretched long, and the cabin would not rest with him. Rain tapped faintly against the window panes, and the wind carried the slow sigh of the pines. Raymond sat at the table, the lamp throwing a single golden circle across the wood. The tag lay there, dull under the light, its letters carved in a soldier's impatience. Shadow. He turned it over again and again until something else caught his eye. Faint coordinates scratched beneath the name, almost invisible, like a message left for whoever still cared enough to look. The numbers pointed to a place deep inside Pike National Forest, near the old mill road, a route long forgotten on maps, swallowed by trees and memory. He exhaled, set the tag down, and rose from his chair. The dog by the hearth stirred. The small creature's eyes opened as if it, too, had felt the pull of those numbers. By dawn, Raymond had packed his gear, a canvas rucksack, a thermos, his old field knife, and lifted the puppy into the passenger seat of his truck. It had regained a little strength, but the fragility was still there in every movement, in the way its ribs lifted like thin branches in a breeze. He placed the memorial bag beside it. The puppy's head rested against the bag's edge, and with that, it closed its eyes again, finally calm. The road south wound through low valleys and pale ridges. By noon, the clouds had gathered in dark folds over the mountains. Lightning flared on the horizon, white and quick, followed by the deep growl of thunder that rolled like the voice of something ancient. Rain came soon after, not gentle but heavy, a storm that beat the earth into smoke. The wipers scraped in rhythm, barely keeping pace with the downpour. Raymond leaned forward over the wheel, his jaw set, every muscle remembering how to drive blind. Old Mill Road was a ghost itself, broken asphalt swallowed by roots and moss. The air smelled of pine resin and wet earth, the scent of a world unspoiled by time. At mile 12, he slowed. On the right side of the track stood a crooked mailbox, rusted, its numbers nearly erased. He brushed the water from the metal. 344 Old Mill Road. The rain softened as he turned into the narrow path. The forest opened into a clearing, and there it was, a small cabin, older than most men still alive. Its roof bowed, chimney exhaling a thin ribbon of smoke. Windows glowed faintly against the gray of the storm. It didn't look abandoned. It looked haunted by memory. Raymond stepped out, the puppy tucked against his chest. The air was cooler here, heavy with the scent of cedar and ash. As he approached, the door creaked open, not cautiously, but with the quiet certainty of someone who had been waiting. The man who appeared in the doorway was in his 80s, tall but slightly stooped, his frame held together by habit more than strength. Silas Ward, the kind of soldier time never fully retired. His hair was white and thin, but his eyes were clear, a piercing steel gray that missed nothing. He wore an old army field jacket over flannel, sleeves rolled up past the elbows, hands calloused and trembling slightly. His gaze went straight to the bag in Raymond's hand. "You found her," he whispered. The words fell heavy, carrying both disbelief and relief. For a moment, neither man moved. The storm eased into drizzle, raindrops whispering against the porch roof. Raymond stepped forward, nodding once. "I wasn't sure who she was," he said quietly. "You will," Silas murmured, opening the door wider. "Come in." Inside, the cabin was a shrine. Every wall was lined with photographs of dogs, framed, labeled, each one adorned with medals and old patches from different units. Shepherds, labs, Malinois, eyes bright, postures proud. Beneath them hung collars, name tags, and faded commendations. It smelled of tobacco, pine, and the faint metallic trace of nostalgia. Silas gestured toward the fireplace. Raymond set the bag down gently on the rug. The puppy, cradled in his arm, watched everything in silence, eyes wide and unblinking. Silas sank into an old leather chair, his breath uneven. "I trained her," he said softly. "Shadow. She was the best I ever had." Raymond looked toward the photographs, scanning the faces. "She was one of yours?" "She was more than that," Silas replied. "She was the last." He leaned forward, elbows on knees, voice trembling with the weight of years. "When I left the service, they sent the old ones home to me. The retired K9s, the ones too broken or too loyal to let go. I built this place for them. Give them a field, a bed, a name again. When each one passed, I kept their tags." His eyes flicked toward the bag. "That's what you found." Raymond nodded slowly, understanding dawning like light through fog. "A memorial." Silas smiled faintly. "A promise." He reached out, fingertips brushing the torn canvas. "She took it," he whispered. "Shadow took it the night she died." Raymond straightened. "Took it?" Silas nodded, tears welling but not falling. "A storm, much like this one. Lightning hit the north ridge. Fire broke out. I tried to get them out, but I couldn't move fast enough. Shadow stayed behind. When I came back after the fire, the bag was gone. So was she." The rain crackled louder against the roof, filling the silence between them. Raymond looked down at the puppy now resting near the bag, its small paw touching the fabric as if recognizing it. "She carried it out," Silas said. "Carried them all, every name, every soul, out of the fire. Must have made it to the canyon before she—" His voice trailed off. Raymond felt the weight of the room settle over him. The faces on the walls, the photographs of eyes that once watched men like him walk into danger and back. "She never quit her post," he murmured. Silas closed his eyes, nodding. "No, not even death made her leave it." For a moment, neither man spoke. The air held too much of the past to risk breaking it with words. Then the puppy stirred, its head lifted, gaze fixed toward the fireplace. Raymond followed its eyes. Above the mantel hung a framed photograph, a full-grown German shepherd, chestnut coat with black saddle, proud stance, eyes sharp yet kind. The resemblance was undeniable. "Shadow," Silas breathed, voice cracking. The puppy took a hesitant step forward, tail low, trembling, not in fear, but recognition. The fire popped once, scattering sparks like falling stars across the hearth. Raymond looked from the photograph to the small life beside him, and the truth rose quietly, inevitable as dawn. Shadow had never truly left. The rain outside thinned into a mist that clung to the windows like breath. Inside, the air was heavy with cedar smoke and quiet firelight. Every log's crack was a pulse, steady and human, as if the cabin itself had learned to breathe with those who survived inside it. Silas Ward sat hunched forward, elbows on his knees, his eyes fixed on the flames as though they were whispering something back from the dead. Raymond waited, still, patient, knowing that silence often carried more truth than words ever could. "She wasn't supposed to die that way," Silas said finally, his voice a splintered whisper. "Shadow was meant to live out her days here, with the others. She'd already given everything she had." Raymond didn't speak. The light painted half of Silas's face gold and the other half in shadow, a portrait of a man split between pride and grief. "Shadow was a retired police K-9, he continued. "Explosives unit, Denver PD, 8 years of service. She could smell C4 from 2 blocks away, they used to say. But what she really could smell was fearful. She never let it win." He paused, rubbing the back of his neck as if the memories still ached there. "Her handler, Officer Hayes. He died in a raid 2 years before I took her in. Meth lab down near Pueblo. An explosion took the whole building. She made it out, but she wouldn't leave the door until they brought him out too." The fire popped once, sharp and sudden like an echo from that day. "They said she stopped eating," Silas murmured. "Sat by the door for weeks. You could see it. She was waiting for orders that would never come. I pulled some strings, got her discharged, brought her here. Figured maybe she'd learn to live again if she had something to protect." Raymond's gaze wandered to the walls. Rows of photographs hung in perfect symmetry, each framed with care. Medals dulled by years, collars mounted like relics. The room didn't look like a home. It looked like a sanctuary built out of loss and devotion. "That's when I gave her the bag," Silas said, nodding toward the heavy canvas sack on the table. "Every tag inside has a name. Every name, a story. Dogs who served, dogs who fell. It's our Hall of Fame, I guess. She guarded it like a living thing. Slept beside it, ate beside it. If anyone got close, she'd growl low, not out of anger, out of duty." His words softened. "Then one morning, she was gone. I thought she'd gone off to die somewhere quiet. That's what old dogs do. They find their place, lie down, and let the world forget." The pup beside the hearth stirred. A small whimper escaped its throat, soft as wind through pine needles. Silas looked down and smiled faintly. "But I was wrong," he said. "That night she wasn't dying. She was carrying life." Raymond's eyes lifted slowly. "The pup." Silas nodded, tears slipping free without resistance now. "She dragged that 40-pound bag through 5 miles of canyon. Rain pouring, rocks cutting her paws raw, blood and mud every few yards. I saw the trail myself. She must have weighed barely 60 pounds, but she kept pulling. Duty carried what strength couldn't." He inhaled shakily. "She found a hollow under the ridge near the creek. That's where she had them. 6 pups." His voice cracked again. "Only one made it." The words hung in the air like ashes that refused to fall. Raymond looked at the small creature by the fire, fur patchy, brown with streaks of black, chest rising in slow rhythm. A survivor. a legacy. Silas reached down and touched its head, his hand trembling as though touching something sacred. She gave him everything she had left. For a long while, neither spoke. The firelight painted their faces in moving gold. Raymond's reflection shimmered in the brass tags spilling from the bag, the ghosts of dogs whose names were still being spoken through metal and memory. Then Raymond noticed it, the collar around the pup's neck. Oversized, cracked, and stiff with age. The brass buckle was dulled by grime. He leaned closer, brushing a thumb over the tag. The letters were faint, but still there. "Shadow," he murmured. Silas nodded. Couldn't take it off. It didn't feel right. She never left him without a piece of her. Raymond sat back, the warmth of the fire brushing his hands. The truth settled deep in his chest, not like a revelation, but like a return. The pup wasn't just alive. It was carrying the last breath of a dog who had refused to die until her mission was safe. He looked at Silas. "Do you ever think she knew?" "Knew what?" "That this would happen. That she'd have to pass it on." Silas smiled faintly, the kind that hurts more than tears. If she didn't know, she felt it. Dogs like her always do. The pup shifted, pressing its nose against the canvas bag. One small sound, not a bark, not a cry, just a note of belonging. Raymond whispered, "This one's not just a survivor. He's a messenger." Silas nodded slowly. She would have wanted that. The two men sat in quiet reverence. Outside, the mist thickened, wrapping the cabin in pale gray. Inside, time moved softer, the rhythm of rain returning to earth, the sound of old ghosts resting. Then, somewhere beyond the pines, a new sound stirred, faint at first, then growing. A low, mechanical hum. Raymond's head turned toward the window. The pup's ears rose, eyes sharp, muscles tensing beneath the small frame. Silas frowned. "Are you expecting someone?" Raymond shook his head. The noise grew closer, steady, deliberate. Through the fog, light slashed across the window pane, carving thin white lines through the room. It swept across the photographs, the medals, and finally the bag. The engine idled outside. Then, the sound of a car door creaking open. Raymond rose slowly, instinct overtaking, fatigue. The fire's glow caught on his face, turning his eyes into mirrors of flame. The pup pressed against the bag, a low growl vibrating in its chest. Silas stood too, silent, every old instinct in his bones waking up. Outside, footsteps crunched over wet gravel. Raymond's gaze met Silas's. No words. Just the quiet understanding of two men who had lived long enough to know what it meant when peace was interrupted by headlights in the dark. The forest, it seemed, had been listening all along. The mist outside had thickened into a pale wall. Beyond it, an engine idled, its rhythm steady and menacing, like a heart that refused to stop beating. Raymond stood by the window, watching the faint red glow of taillights pulsing through the fog. The night no longer belonged to the forest. It belonged to whoever had come to claim what should never have been taken. The SUV door opened with a dull thud. Two men emerged, their boots crunching the gravel, black jackets slick with rain. The faint glimmer of a corporate insignia shone on their sleeves, a silver K9 emblem above words nearly erased by time. Centra Tactical Division. Their posture spoke of habit, not honor. Men used to getting what they came for. Raymond opened the door before they reached it. The air between them felt cold, heavy, and practiced. He didn't need to hear their names to know their type. Men who measured loyalty in dollars and history and inventory. Behind him, Silas Ward stood silent, his hand resting on the memorial bag as if it were an altar. The small pup, Max, stirred by the fire, sensing the shift in the air. The visitors stepped into the threshold, rain dripping from their coats. They didn't ask permission. One carried a folded document, the other scanned the room, eyes landing on the olive canvas bag on the table. He smiled, not with warmth, but recognition. They said a few words Raymond didn't need to hear. Words like property, authorization, retrieval. The tone was rehearsed, the arrogance familiar. They weren't here for justice. They were here for profit. The company that had once trained war dogs now scavenged the ghosts of its own making, selling the memories of loyalty as trinkets to collectors. Silas's breath grew uneven. Raymond felt the tension rise behind him like a storm building in silence. The men's hands rested near their belts, one on a holster, the other on the corner of his clipboard, as though authority came printed on paper. But Raymond had lived long enough to know the sound of truth when it left a man's body. And these men didn't have it. He spoke a few words, the kind that cut through static without needing to shout. The tone of a soldier who'd once commanded through chaos. They froze. Not because he threatened them, but because they recognized something in him they couldn't control. Calm conviction. The taller one moved first, impatience flashing behind his professional mask. He reached forward, fingers grazing the edge of the bag. That small motion, that arrogance, broke the stillness. Raymond moved faster. The motion was clean, instinctive. A twist of the wrist, a shift of weight, the dull impact of a man hitting wood. The clipboard clattered to the floor. The second man reached for his weapon, but the sound that came next froze him in place. Max. The little pup had risen, standing firm beside Silas. His fur bristled, teeth bared in a growl far too deep for his size. For a sot moment, under the flicker of firelight, Raymond saw it, Shadow's stance reborn. The same fire, the same defiance, the same unspoken vow to protect what could not protect itself. The man's hand hesitated, then fell away. In that second, the cabin filled with something greater than threat, a presence, ancient and sacred, like loyalty itself had entered the room. Outside, sirens cut through the mist. Red and blue light bled into the trees, spinning against the fog like restless ghosts. The SUV's engine died as the men turned, unsure now whether to fight or flee. Moments later, headlights swept the porch. The sheriff's car pulled in behind the SUV, followed by a smaller truck, Dr. Evelyn Hart, her face drawn tight with worry. She had come when she saw the unfamiliar lights on the ridge. Evelyn stepped inside without asking, rain dripping from her coat. Her eyes took in the scene, Raymond's posture, the two intruders, Silas trembling by the table, and then the insignia stitched on their sleeves. Her expression changed. That name, Centra Tactical Division, it carried history. A company once contracted to train and supply K-9 units during the war. A company that vanished under scandal when someone discovered its memorabilia auctions, the online sale of identification tags belonging to deceased service dogs. It hadn't been remembrance. It had been desecrated. Evelyn's voice broke the silence, calm but shaking. She didn't need to accuse. The truth revealed itself in the eyes of the men, in their silence, in the hollow authority they wore like armor. Raymond turned toward the table. The bag lay open, its contents scattered across the wood, hundreds of gleaming tags, silver and brass catching the flicker of the fire. The names shimmered under the light. K-9 Duke, K-9 Baron, K-9 Rex, soldiers, every one of them. He knelt, picking one up. The metal was cool, but it throbbed faintly in his palm, like memory had its own pulse. "Shadow knew," he whispered, his voice more breath than sound. No one answered. They didn't need to. The realization spread through the room like light through smoke. Shadow hadn't vanished to die alone. She had gone back to take back what was stolen. Each tag she'd carried, one at a time, was an act of rebellion, of love disguised as defiance. Her final mission had not been survival, but salvation. Silas sank slowly to his knees. His hands trembled as he gathered the spilled tags back into the bag, clutching it to his chest. The sound they made, that small metallic clinking, filled the cabin with something too pure for words. It was the sound of names being reclaimed. Rain pressed against the windows. Harder now, as if the sky itself understood what had just been restored. The sheriff escorted the men out. Their confidence had drained away with the color in their faces. The forest swallowed their retreat. When their footsteps vanished into the distance, only the hum of the storm remained. Inside, Evelyn knelt beside Silas. The old man was still holding the bag, his lips moving silently as if speaking to someone unseen. Raymond watched him, and the truth came slow but clear. Silas wasn't praying. He was reporting for duty one last time. His breath came shallower, his eyes softened. The lines of worry around his mouth eased into a faint, tired smile. "They can rest now," he murmured, almost inaudible. Raymond knelt beside him, a steady hand on his shoulder. The old soldier's strength ebbed like a tide going out, not in pain, but in peace. For the first time in years, his burden had lifted. The pup moved closer, curling beside him, resting his head against the edge of the bag. The tiny rise and fall of his chest was the only sound left in the room. Raymond stayed there, one hand on Silas's shoulder, the other brushing over Max's back. The fire burned low, painting the walls in amber and shadow. Outside, the forest grew still again, as though honoring its fallen guardians. After a while, Raymond spoke softly, voice trembling in reverence. "Your mother didn't run away," he said. "She went on one last mission." The words lingered, floating somewhere between prayer and promise. Evelyn turned away, tears tracing lines down her cheeks. The sheriff stood at the door, hat pressed to his chest, a silent salute. The final crack of the fire marked the end. Silas's breathing stopped with it. A soft stillness filled the space where a man's duty had finally ended. Then, a sound, small, sure, and filled with life. Max barked once, a single note that carried both grief and defiance, as if acknowledging that something sacred had passed from one life to another. Outside, the storm began to clear. The clouds parted just enough for the moon to spill light across the cabin roof, turning the mist silver. It was faint, but it was enough. And there, in that light, stood 3 shadows. One man, one pup, and the spirit of a dog who had never truly left. Justice had returned to the forgotten. Honor had been dug out of the dirt, and in the quiet heart of the Colorado wilderness, the legacy of Shadow lived on, breathing, watching, waiting for dawn. The air in the valley had changed. The scent of autumn carried a gentler kind of silence. Not the heavy hush of grief, but the soft breathing of peace finding its place again. The leaves turned brittle and gold along the ridgelines, and the river below ran clear enough to mirror the sky. Every morning, a low mist rolled through the hollows, curling over fences and porch rails like memory unwilling to leave. It had been several weeks since that night. The storms were gone, and so were the intruders. The cabin, once haunted by fear and ghosts of loyalty, had grown quiet in a way that no longer hurt. Raymond rose before dawn, as he always did, habit more than need. The yard was damp with dew, the soil soft beneath his boots. Max ran circles through the grass, his paws sending up faint arcs of light where water caught the sunrise. He'd grown taller, stronger, his chestnut and black coat gleaming with life. The awkwardness of youth had faded from his stride. Now he moved with rhythm, the kind of instinct that didn't come from training, but from inheritance. Raymond watched him stop, lower his head, and turn toward a sound only he could hear. The rustle of leaves, the whisper of air where nobody passed. Then he sat, patient, waiting for a signal. It came, a small whistle, low and steady. Raymond smiled. Good boy. From the porch above, Silas Ward sat wrapped in a wool blanket, shoulders hunched against the chill. His breathing had grown shallow these past days, but his eyes still carried the brightness of a man who'd seen his purpose completed. He watched as Raymond guided the young dog through simple drills, hand gestures, distance calls, the quiet discipline of respect. The pup obeyed each one, sharp and focused, as if remembering something he had never been taught. When Raymond looked up, Silas was smiling, just barely, the kind of smile that doesn't belong to this world anymore. He raised a hand, as if to say something, then let it fall. The wind lifted a lock of his silver hair. She'd be proud, he whispered. The words came like breath itself, a release, not a statement. His eyes drifted shut, and his body relaxed into stillness. Raymond stood there for a long time, unable to move. Max tilted his head, ears forward, waiting for a sound that wouldn't come. The valley seemed to pause with them, the breeze stilling, even the birds holding their song. When Raymond finally climbed the porch steps, he found the old soldier as he had lived, seated upright, hands resting gently over the blanket, face turned toward the rising sun. The warmth caught his skin in gold, softening the lines that war and time had carved. Silas Ward had simply gone home. They buried him that afternoon under the old oak behind the cabin, the same ground where Shadow had been laid to rest. The roots twisted deep, binding soil and memory together. Raymond placed the bag of tags between the two graves, sealed inside a Dutch-eye glass case. Beneath the fading light, it shimmered like a chest of stars. He carved 2 names into the wooden cross: Shadow, faithful until the end; Silas Ward, keeper of the watch. Evelyn came from town with wildflowers, blue lupine and yellow primrose. She didn't speak. None of them did. The silence felt right, as if words would only break the fragile beauty of the moment. When the last shovel of earth was pressed down, Raymond stood with his hand on the marker, his reflection faint in the glass that now held the fallen tags. They no longer clinked when touched. They rested. The bag had become something greater, a promise encased in stillness, the Hall of Honor. That night, the valley exhaled its final breath of summer. The stars rose over Pike's Crest, scattered across the indigo sky like the names inside the case. Raymond set out along the forest trail behind the cabin. He didn't carry a lantern. The moon was full, and the light it gave was enough. Max trotted beside him, his movements fluid, confident. His fur brushed against Raymond's leg with every stride, a small reassurance that the world still held connection. Somewhere behind them, the cabin's windows glowed faintly, a flicker of life surrounded by the vast quiet of the pines. They followed the old logging path that cut through the valley. Every step Raymond took sank softly into the earth, and every echo reminded him of the countless boots that had marched before: men, dogs, duty, and the weight of remembering. The forest whispered, not in sorrow, but in recognition. He stopped where the path opened into a clearing. The oak stood there, its branches like arms reaching toward heaven. Beneath it, two graves slept side by side, the glass case between them catching the moonlight. It reflected the world back upside down, the earth above, the stars below. Raymond knelt, his hand resting on the soil. Max sat quietly beside him, eyes trained on the horizon. For a while, neither moved. Then the wind changed. It came low and steady through the trees, carrying a scent that was neither forest nor rain. It was familiar, warm, faint, and alive. Max lifted his head, nostrils flaring. His ears twitched, his body tense not with fear but awareness. He looked up toward the ridge, eyes bright in the dark, the same golden hue that shadows once held. Raymond followed his gaze but saw nothing, just the pale movement of leaves, the play of shadow over stone. Yet he felt it too, the presence that lingered just beyond sight, the comfort of something that didn't need to be seen to be real. A whisper brushed the air, not words but memory. And in that silence, Raymond understood. Some guardians never truly leave. They simply pass the watch forward. Max turned to him then, tail sweeping through the leaves, as if asking permission to move on. Raymond smiled, not as a soldier, not as a man haunted by what he'd lost, but as someone finally free to remember without pain. He rose, brushing the dirt from his hands. "Come on, partner," he murmured. "Let's go home." They walked back down the trail, moonlight spilling over their path like a river of silver. The sound of the wind followed them, softer now, almost like a lullaby. When they reached the cabin, the fire inside still glowed through the window, a single, steady light against the dark. Raymond sat on the steps, Max curling beside him, head resting on his boot. The forest lay still. The valley breathed slowly. Somewhere above, the stars burned quietly, each one a name, each one a story that would not be forgotten. He looked down at the pup and smiled again. Because not every battle ends in victory. Some end in remembrance. And not every angel comes with wings. Some wear fur and carry the weight of those we lost, until love finally teaches them to rest. It began with a dying puppy in the desert, and ended with a man, a soldier, learning that some battles are won not by strength, but by remembrance. Some stories don't end when the mission does. They linger, in the way the wind moves through the trees, or how a loyal heart keeps watch long after the footsteps fade. Maybe that's what honor really is. The quiet promise to protect what we love, even when no one's left to see it. In a world that shouts for attention, there are still souls who choose silence, standing their posts, unseen, unthanked, but unshaken. They carry courage not in medals, but in the simple act of never walking away. Because kindness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just walks beside us, in fur, in faith, in memory, reminding us that even after loss, the world can still be gentle. And if tonight feels too quiet, listen closer. Somewhere out there, a light is still burning, a watch is still kept, and love, the kind that never needs to be seen, is still guarding the dark. If stories like this still warm your heart, stay with us and subscribe to Healing with Max.